Since the dawn of civilization, humanity pondered over the question of where we, as a species, will go and what will happen when we get there. But it was not until the 19th century that we realized that we had the technology to do great things and to expand beyond the limits of our own imagination. If you think that some technologies from, for instance, Star Trek, seems far-fetched, think again. Many of these devices from the acclaimed television series are slowly becoming a reality. But where does this particular knowledge about these advanced technologies come from? Do extraterrestrial beings exchange this information via a yet unknown form of communication that vibrates through your whole body? A form of brain-to-brain communication, creating a holographic image in the midbrain? Or is there something what is that logic and common? Many of us never thought of being a plausible answer to why our species feel this almost uncontrollable urge of applying artificial intelligence to our existence. I am your host, Maria-Anne van Driel, and you are listening to The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. This week's guest was, from 1991 to 1994, an employee at the British government's Ministry of Defence, where he was working on real-life X-Files. Currently, he is a freelance journalist and media commentator, and is by the media called the real Fox Mulder. I am talking about none other than the UFO expert, Nick Pope. Nick, welcome to The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. I am really happy to have you in our show. I sent you in front the intro. What do you thought of it?
I thought it was great, very creative, very mysterious, something that I think should generate a lot of interest. I liked it.
Oh, thank you so much. As I shared in your introduction, you are being called the real Fox Mulder. You have probably heard this a million of times, but how did you get your nickname?
This was a joke that the British media first started when it was revealed that I was doing this job for the Ministry of Defence, and when the British government began to declassify and release some of its UFO files, one of the journalists, and I can't remember who, but one journalist writing an article about me and my UFO work for the British government made this comparison and said, well, Nick must be the real Fox Mulder working on the real life X-Files. And it must have struck a chord with people because they started repeating this, and I started seeing it in newspapers and magazines. And at first, I thought it trivialized my government work, but then I thought, no, you can't be, too precious about this. Just go with the joke, and it's good fun, and that's how it all started.
That is a nice nickname because, yeah, like you said, it triggers the curiosity of people, and in the same time, it's mysterious. I also read on somewhere in a very short bio of you that your wife is also a scientist, so that is clicking together with the series, The X-Files.
Yes, well, in fact, I'm not a scientist. I was a civil servant for the government, but my wife is a scientist. She is also a skeptic and a redhead. So the joke is also that she's my real life Scully.
Most of the people, when they hear your name, Nick Pope, they automatically relate you to UFOs and extraterrestrial life forms and secret documents.
but you are also a freelance journalist. How did you get into journalism from Ministry of Defense to journalism?
When I took early retirement from the Ministry of Defense, and again, this was at the same time as the British government was releasing a lot of the files and documents relating to my old job, many journalists came to me and wrote features about me and my government work. Somewhere along the line, one newspaper must have said to me, well, we would like you to write up the article in your own words. So write it as an op-ed or an opinion piece. So I did that, and a lot of the journalists and newspapers saw my writing style and quite liked it, and I got asked to write some more. And then I found that because people were asking me to write about UFOs, they were asking me to write about other mysteries and perhaps about conspiracy theories too. So I started broadening the subjects that I wrote about. And in one way, sometimes when you read an article written about you and government work, you think, well, they get the direct quotes right, of course, because they have to use that. But sometimes I looked and I thought, oh, they got this wrong, or I could have done it better. So I like writing the articles myself because it means that I can be 100% certain that all the information is correct.
Yes. How did you get into, well, the MOD? How did you got into there? There's the moment that you stepped into that in that world.
Well, my father had been a senior government scientist, and he was an aeronautical engineer. But he as he became more senior in government, he stopped doing hands-on science and became a manager of scientific programs. And in fact, he ended up as the deputy chief scientific advisor for the Ministry of Defense. So we used to have a joke that the Ministry of Defense was the family firm. And so he said to me, why don't you apply to join the family firm? And he said, I find the work very interesting and varied. He said, it doesn't pay as much as if you were working for private industry. But he said, you'll find the work more interesting, and you'll find that subjects that you're dealing with are the sorts of things that you see on the television news in the evening. And if you want to be a part of something interesting and important and work for your country, then you should consider applying. So I thought that sounded fascinating, of course, and I applied, and I was accepted. And in the course of, I served for 21 years as a civilian employee in the Ministry of Defense, and I did, I think, 7 different jobs, completely different jobs. I mean, I was involved in many, many different subjects, ranging from financial policy through to counterterrorism. So you can see the Ministry of Defense is a huge organization, but of course it's the UFO job that I'm best known for.
But you mentioned science and interesting in one, well, almost one sentence. How does that relate to well, the Ministry of Defense and UFOs?
Well, the science, yes, the science would come in our discussions, for example, about if UFOs are real, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with something from Russia or China, or maybe a different part of our own government that has developed something so highly classified that the information isn't being shared with other parts of government, or is it from somewhere else? We didn't know. But the science would come in, for example, in looking at photographs and videos of these things and saying, well, what is the aerodynamics of this in terms of propulsion, energy source? How would this fly? If it is Russia, have they made some quantum leap development in technology? Is leaving us behind. So the science would come in there, for example.
How did you get interested in, well, researching UFOs or advanced aircraft or unidentified objects? There must be a moment in your life, except for your father introducing you to the company. What was the first moment that you got interested in that? Did you have an experience, or did you saw something, or just out of the blue?
No, I have never seen anything myself, and I didn't have a particular interest in it. This may sound quite funny, but I had really not thought about the subject at all until I was already in the Ministry of Defense, and I'd been in the Ministry of Defense for, I think, 5 years, and I'd already had a promotion, and I'd done a personnel job, and I had done a job that related to the Royal Navy, and then this vacancy came up, and I was due for a move, and this position became vacant, and somebody said to me, do you want this particular job? It's free if you want it. And I said, what is the job about? And the manager said, well, it's UFOs. So I didn't have any knowledge. I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any particular beliefs. To me, this was just another government position that I was put into, and it happened to be the job that dealt with UFOs. In the Ministry of Defense, you are moved around every few years, either on a level transfer or on a promotion, and I was simply put into that job. So it was almost a case of pure chance.
By chance, you get to research what many UFO hunters would like to research. That sounds really, really cool. You said, if they are real, just a couple of seconds ago. What do you think? How, in percent, how many could there be real? I mean, the UFOs from, for instance, another galaxy.
Well, we received about 200 or 300 reports each year. But of course, this was a small percentage. We were only investigating sightings in British airspace. And of course, many people who saw these things didn't make a report, either because they didn't know who to contact or because they were afraid of being ridiculed or disbelieved. So over the years, I think the British government, in the lifetime of this program, we received about 12,000 cases. And this is a very, very approximate estimate, but roughly speaking, 80% of those sightings we could explain with a high degree of confidence as misidentifications of ordinary objects and phenomena, aircraft lights, weather balloons, satellites, meteors, etc., etc. In 15% of the cases, we really didn't have enough information to make a definitive assessment. And in around 5% of cases, even after investigation, we said this is unknown. Now, it is important to say, because a case is unknown, of course, it does not mean it's extraterrestrial, but neither did we rule out that possibility. And as we always used to say, we didn't need a whole lot of different cases. We only needed one case to be, say, from another galaxy. And the world in which we live changes forever in terms of who we are, what we think our place is in the wider cosmos. Now, we have not proved this. We have not proved this, but there are some intriguing pieces of evidence and some fascinating cases.
You say you only need one case to be that unknown that it has a highly possibility of coming from extraterrestrial, another galaxy, or wherever it may be come from. So I was thinking, if programs where you have been working on for terrorism or for identifying an aircraft from another country, there could be, and now I'm playing the devil's advocate, I hope that you are allowed to answer this, there could be third option for programs as such, for England or for the USA, creating that advanced technology in aircrafts and in airplanes, or that a shadow program is behind it, is just observing their own aircrafts, but that advanced that people do not understand how advanced it is. For example, bending light or flying on electromagnetic waves, etc. So I hope that you are allowed to answer this question.
Certainly, yes, it is entirely possible that some of these UFO sightings could be, for example, secret prototype aircraft, missiles, or drones. And in the world of government, of course, information is often highly classified. It is sometimes deeply compartmentalized, where, as we say, we have a saying, the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing. Very often in many fields in life, but often, particularly with these highly classified programs, because even in the same organization, you don't want to tell other people. So yes, this is very possible theory that we always had to consider. Now, I think it is likely that if we had been investigating a case and we had been, how you would say, stirring up a hornet's nest, making waves, that somebody would have come to us quietly and said, look, there's no need to dig too deeply into this one. We know about this. And even if they didn't then tell you all the details, we would have backed off. So this is one argument against the possibility, but I can't rule it out. And it's interesting, in the United States, at the moment, the Senate Intelligence Committee is taking a look at UFOs, and the poor information sharing between different parts of government is one of their big concerns. So this is very, very much an issue, yes.
Yeah, poor information sharing, I can understand that country A or country B doesn't want to know from each other, or doesn't want to share from each other the technology and etc., just in case that they need to fight with it. So from that point of view, it's logic that people do not share this kind of information.
Yes, so we always had to be mindful of that possibility, for sure. But we also had a saying, and this is really just repeating the point I made about one case, but to show you how we thought about this, we had a saying in relation to UFOs. The skeptics have to be right every time. The believers only need to be right once.
So you think that there is a third program idea that reverse technology, like for instance, my microwave in my kitchen, is coming from that kind of advanced technology people yet do not understand.
I'm quite skeptical about that. I think you would need to look at the history of scientific understanding and technological progress to
Yeah.
say, I mean, no piece of technology suddenly springs into existence. It usually evolves from a simpler version of the same device. And of course, any device itself evolves from an advance in human understanding of science. So, for example, our understanding, I suppose, of the basic laws of physics and thermodynamics and motion leads to the development of technologies such as the internal combustion engine. So one could look at the history of science and technology, and if we saw something suddenly appear from nowhere with no precursor, then this would be suspicious. But to my knowledge, that has not happened. So I am not one of these people that believes that the technologies we see today have been derived from crashed UFOs, because I think if that was the case, we would suddenly, from nowhere, almost magically, have some new device. But I don't think the history of science and technology supports that theory. But I am happy to be proved wrong. I mean, it would certainly be very more interesting, I suppose.
How does your name and everything that is related to your name and what you have done, how is this influencing your, well, private life, your daily activities?
Well, it's, I suppose, has had quite a profound effect, because instead of being an anonymous government civil servant, I'm now somebody who does a lot of television shows, whether it's a news report on UFOs, or whether it's a documentary series on the unexplained, or whether it is acting as a consultant or a spokesperson to science fiction films and TV series. So I am now much more of a public figure than I was. And sometimes I'm in the grocery store and somebody will come up and say hello and ask to have a photo and maybe tell me a story about something strange that they've seen or experienced. So it's had a profound effect, yes.
Not only are you a journalist and related to the Ministry of Defense and unexplained phenomena in the sky, but you are also an author. I believe your last book is Blood Brothers. I have read that your book has undergone, well, a sort of security check. Since when does a book undergoes a security check? There must be something that you have been written, perhaps, that was too revealing.
Well, there are strict rules that apply when government employees who have been involved in highly classified work write books. And even though I take my security oath very seriously, and I only discuss government matters that the government has itself declassified and released, you still have to be careful, because particularly with the work of fiction, it's sometimes difficult to forget, to remember whether you have come across some piece of information in a newspaper or in a classified file. So when government employees write books, whether it's non-fiction or even a work of fiction, we generally have to send the manuscript back to the government and say, read this and check that I have not accidentally put some classified information in.
Yeah, that you have mixed it up a bit.
And Blood Brothers, I've written several books, some non-fiction books about UFOs based on my government work. But Blood Brothers was a thriller. So it's a fictional book, but it's about the intelligence agencies and it's about terrorism. And my last posting in the Ministry of Defense, I was in security. So counterterrorism was a big part of everything we did. So it was particularly important to make sure that I hadn't inadvertently included something that should not be in a book that anyone can pick up and read.
I read that some of the things that you have written in your book actually did happen, or at least some of the things crossed your desk.
Yes. Now it's confusing because I've written 3 non-fiction books about UFOs. Now those were very closely based on my government work, and of course on the Ministry of Defense files that I mentioned that have now been declassified and released. Then I wrote 2 science fiction novels about an alien invasion, but again I included some cases from the Ministry of Defense UFO files as well. So it was science fiction, but some of it was based on real cases and real government procedures. And with Blood Brothers, again, telling the story of intelligence agencies and special forces hunting down terrorists. Although it's a work of fiction, it was very closely based on real government policy, procedures, everything from the guns that they use to the tactics. So of course, it's particularly important not to reveal anything that would help people with bad intentions. So I did not complain that I had to get security clearance for these books. It's just part of the process, and I was happy to comply with it.
You having worked there for, as you said, 21 years, that is a tremendous long time. So I can imagine that you have, during those 21 years, grown into the company's activities and the people that work there or still working there. But then that day comes that you stop working there. You retire, and then you go, well, almost like living like a civilian. How did you experience that? How did your typical day look like after that, after so many years?
Yes, it was a very difficult transition to make. I had done, as you say, 21 years, and I had been involved in everything from the UFO job, of course, through to counterterrorism policy. I had visited some interesting places like Kosovo and Iraq, and had a top secret security clearance, and I would be attending meetings on subjects, and we would have people from MI5 and MI6 coming in, and we would be discussing all these things. And then the next day, sitting at home, almost thinking, well, now what do I do? And it is a difficult transition. I think one thing that helped is that I, of course, after 21 years, many of my friends were in the Ministry of Defense and in other parts of the government. So, of course, I used to see them socially, and we would talk about the old days and what was going on and who was doing what and which person had been promoted and which subjects were currently causing a lot of controversy and difficulty. And so for a while, even though I had left, it was almost like half of me was still back there.
I can believe that. That is
I think
something
it's the same.
you do not just switch off. That is going very slowly and perhaps never will leave your life entirely.
Yes, and I'm sure it's the same with many, many people in many different walks of life that for a while still in the same social circles, and so it's almost as if you are, as I say, if not working there full time, it's almost like working there part time.
I suddenly have to think about the movie Men in Black, the scenes that the actors looking up into the sky at the stars, etc., and thinking about that moment from active duty to civilian life. Is that something that you also have done? That you look up to into the skies and just think, what is out there?
Yes, I think that, and I'm now very fortunate that I live in the United States, in Tucson, Arizona, and we have wonderful big open skies here. You can see the stars, and of course, one cannot help but look up and wonder what might be out there. And with the pace of scientific discovery at the moment, and the telescopes that are looking further and further out, further back in time, of course, whether they're optical telescopes or radio telescopes that could perhaps listen for a signal from other civilizations. And I, of course, wonder, is it just a matter of time before we make a scientific discovery that proves definitively that we're not alone in the universe? And when that moment comes, how profoundly might it affect every aspect of human life: politics, religion, economics, science, technology, philosophy, everything.
Yeah, you just stole my question, because that is exactly what I wanted to ask, or what changes we will see when we finally make contact in an understandable and clear way, of course, because I don't know which kind of language an extraterrestrial life form is speaking. But do you think that we will soon make any contact that will, well, prove that there is an alien life form out there, without making a direct or biological contact? I mean, do you think that is possible within, well, let's say 10 years?
Yes, I think it's entirely possible. And it might come about with one of the new and powerful radio telescopes. They might pick up a beacon or a signal, or it might be that we discover unequivocal evidence of a civilization, that we find, for example, what has been called a megastructure. The idea that advanced civilizations might construct huge machines to harness energy from a star, a so-called Dyson sphere, and that our technology is getting to the point where if these things are out there, we might find them. But it leads to a very interesting possibility, as you say in your question, that we might discover this, but without making any face-to-face contact. And indeed, if we pick up a signal, one of the most likely possibilities is that we wouldn't be able to decode it. So in a sense, we would have one piece of information, and one piece of information only. And that would be there's another civilization out there. But perhaps we would know almost nothing about them. And that, in a sense, would be even more frustrating than not knowing at all, because you would know they were there, and yet, frustratingly, you wouldn't know anything about them.
I suddenly have to think about the movie Arrival, where those squiddy aliens are communicating with an inky circle, I believe it is, and that is a complex language. So I can understand the frustration.
Yes, and two of the best science fiction movies out there are Arrival and Contact. And it's not surprising, both of them have at the heart of the film the question, how could we meaningfully communicate with these civilizations? And of course, in Arrival, it's a very interesting philosophical debate about the subtleties of language and how language conveys thought and meaning. And for example, in our own language, the subtle difference between a weapon and a tool. And so there is the potential for misunderstanding and miscommunication, which is why I think that films like Contact and Arrival are so clever.
Yeah, I find especially Arrival. It's one of my favorites. Nick, I received a question from the audience. What is your personal opinion about the idea that alien life forms are using us as a kind of, well, cattle, and is feeding from us in any way possible for energy, or for, like in the movies, that they eat us? What is your personal idea about something like that, about a theory or an idea like that?
It's certainly possible, but I think one could say that in the absence of definitive evidence, almost anything is possible in relation to this question. My own hope, I suppose, is that if we are being visited, or now or at some point in the future, that the extraterrestrials will come here as scientists and as explorers and anthropologists, not as conquerors or exterminators or exploiters of resources. But in an infinite universe, almost anything is possible. And another point, of course, is that if we are not alone in the universe, it's very unlikely that there is just one other civilization. If we're not alone, there are probably countless other civilizations. So, of course, there may be many, many different agendas, strategies.
So what you are saying is that this fear of a threat of an invasion is, well, not real. They are more scientists, like you say.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. But of course, this is just speculation. I mean, when we discuss aliens, of course, we can only apply our own culture and knowledge and understanding of human history. So we inevitably take an anthropocentric view. And so, of course, we look at human history, and human history shows when one group of people encounter another, very often it doesn't end particularly well, and the stronger group often exploits or enslaves or conquers the weaker group. And we see this, and of course, if we apply this philosophy and speculate about extraterrestrials, this is, I'm sure, why the concept of alien invasion is deeply embedded in our consciousness, because it's our own history. It's the tribe from over the next hill coming and attacking. It's hardwired into our own understanding of who we are and what makes us human.
If I may grab back to your books, you say you have written books about UFOs, which are, well, real events, or at least very, very near to real events, and Blood Brothers, which is a thriller discussing terrorism. Are you writing at the moment, or are you planning to write new books? And which topics will they contain?
At the moment, I am not writing another book, but of course this may change very quickly. The main focus of my attention at the moment is my television work. And now, of course, the filming is still paused because of the coronavirus, but as soon as we are back to normal or close to it, then that will resume. And in fact, I think I'm doing my next television interview in about 10 days' time. So things are slowly getting getting back.
Well,
I don't rule out the possibility of writing another book in the future, but at the moment, television work is my focus.
well, you say within 10 days, and where can we find that? What are you speaking about and discussing in that series?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm supposed to make any announcements until something is broadcast. So
We have to wait.
because not because it's particularly secret, but just because normally in the television industry they don't want you to really make an announcement until the network makes an announcement. But you can see me regularly on TV shows such as Ancient Aliens and UFOs, The Lost Evidence, and The Unexplained, and many different shows. And of course, not just documentaries, but sometimes when a news story breaks, I will go on and discuss it on a TV news show. So doing regular work there to keep this subject in the public.
We have to hold on to our curiosity and regularly visit your website to see when there is an announcement of your new series. And in the meanwhile, we can read your books and your articles and see other documentaries about you and in where you perform. Nick, for young people who have this strong urge to work with the Ministry of Defense, hopefully maybe the mysterious cases that they can solve, or young authors, what kind of advice can you give them?
Well, I think that the British government unfortunately terminated their UFO program at the end of 2009. And even if you're in a country where government is still investigating UFOs, your chances of getting that one particular job out of all the thousands of other jobs are very small. So what I would say to people is don't expect to end up investigating UFOs for the government. If you are interested in government work, just whether it's defense, security, intelligence, whatever it is, then do that for its own sake, but don't expect to be doing UFOs. If you're interested in UFOs, you are probably better off joining a civilian research organization like the Mutual UFO Network or one of the many different groups in different countries that do this. So that's one piece of advice. And for writing, well, of course, anyone can write. You just have to, well, I was going to say pick up a pen, but I suppose it's not these days. It's sit at your computer. As an author, if you want to become a writer, I would say the single biggest piece of advice that I could give anyone that wants to become an author is to read as much as you can. I don't know any author who aren't voracious readers, because I think the more you read, the more you understand how a good author will convey their ideas to the readers. And so if you want to write, read.
Well, it sounds logic. Nick, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you and to give a little insight in your life as a former MOD employee and today as a freelance journalist. But before we close out, can you tell us where we can find more information about your articles, about your books, and maybe where people can ask you questions if they have?
Certainly. My website is nickpope.net, and that on the front page has links to my Twitter and my Facebook accounts. So probably most of the new announcements I make on Twitter. So you can find the link at nickpope.net, and indeed my Twitter handle is Nick Pope MOD. which stands for Ministry of Defense. So at Nick Pope MOD. But it's all on my website, nickpope.net.
Thank you all for tuning in this week on The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. Make sure to visit our website, www.nexttruth.com. That is nexttruth, all in one word.com. And let us know what you think about our podcast. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we would appreciate a rating on our website in the section The Next Truth Podcasts. Or if you would simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us too. I am Maria Anna van Driel with The Next Truth. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.